All right, welcome to episode 5 of the Staying Muddy podcast. Today we have Bill Paukert, and he was a tech inspector for Formula SAE. He worked on aircraft maintenance and safety inspections for Delta Airlines for 40 years. What else did you do, Bill? You were a mentor for FSAE, for Cal State LA for how many years now?
Well, I'm still doing it, but I started in January of 12.
So for 8 years?
Well, this is actually 9.
9. Okay, 9 years.
Going into number 10, the 21st, 2000.
Almost a decade.
Yeah.
They better buy you a present.
We'll have a decade party.
Decade party for sure.
All right. So those are kind of the highlights. You were also in the military you said, and it's funny that you had such a specific amount, 21 months and 4 days.
Anybody who was in the Army can tell you exactly how long they were in.
Down to the minute.
Down to the minute, huh? And you said that you were an Army helicopter crew chief. So
right.
You worked on helicopters.
Huge.
All right. Any other notable facts that you want to mention?
Well, when I came out of the Army, when I first started with the airlines, I was in Chicago. And working in Chicago is tough. The weather is just brutal. And the same work that they do out here at LAX, they're doing back in Chicago on the ramp. So we did jobs at night that were your hands get so cold, you might put in one bolt and then go warm up, and then put a second bolt and then warm up. They're just that tough. And so the first opportunity I got to come out here, I took it. I probably could have come about a year earlier than that, but I met my wife just about that time, and I postponed the transfer until I decided what I wanted to do. But and I came out here with the intention of going to college. I went to Northrop Institute of Technology, which is just up the road here in Inglewood. So I attended there about 18 months, but between buying cars and houses and having babies, it was a little bit hectic.
Chasing the LA sun.
Well, what I did was I wound up going back to school. I was offered a job at one point back in about 96, 97. I could have retired after 1996, but I didn't retire until 05. And I at the time, they offered me a job as an instructor at one of the local junior colleges in aircraft maintenance. And I decided that the options were, if you had a PhD, you didn't need any experience in aircraft maintenance at all. But I can't imagine anybody with a PhD working as a maintenance instructor. But that's beside the point. If you had no experience, no degree, but you had like 12, 14 years of experience, that was good. Well, I had at that time over 30 years of experience, but no degree. So I went back and got my AA degree from Northrop. And between all the classes I took for aircraft maintenance and engineering classes I took up there, they were more than willing to give it to me. But I had to go back to school and get one more class because of the state law regulations. You had to attend college in the year in which you got your degree. So when I left Northrop, I could have got it then, but I said, no, what do I need it for? So as I went back and got the degree, and here I am.
All right. So,
but I never took the job as a maintenance instructor. Why, I do not know.
So let's talk about the first question we have for you is what your responsibilities were with helicopters. What kind of work did you do on them? Or as a helicopter chief, crew chief, what were your responsibilities?
Well, as a helicopter crew chief, you fly with the aircraft. So it's in your best interest to make sure that aircraft is as perfect as you can get it. So I would do all the routine maintenance on it. Every day I did a standard inspection where you check all the oils. You made sure that everything was right up to specs. We then, before we'd fly, the flight crew would come out and they do what they call a walk around. They do an inspection on it. And then after we came back, I'd do another inspection on it. And as a crew chief, you actually have the authority to ground the aircraft. At that time, I don't know how it is now, but the military logbooks had a one column for status. And if you put a red X in that column and then stated the reason, that aircraft wasn't going to go anywhere until somebody signed it off, whether it was the crew chief or maybe it was the chief inspector for the company, the military company, or whatever. But you had a lot of authority, and it was a lot of fun because you flew with the aircraft everywhere it went. I mean, we were in a unit that was building up to go to Vietnam, so we would take up a lot of VIPs and fly them around and show them the base. A lot of people wanted to see what was going on at Fort Riley, Kansas. We'd go out and fly around. We went to a ROTC drill meet back in Champaign, Illinois, at the University of Illinois. So I went back with the aircraft back there, and they had static displays, and people come out and want to see the aircraft and ask all kinds of questions. And they generally run out of questions about 2 or 3 minutes into the question. I could have gone a lot further than that. I mean,
what was the coolest helicopter that you worked on?
Well, I worked on the C model Huey. There was when I was in, there were 2 models of Hueys, the C model and the D model. C model was a short frame, and the D model was a longer frame. The D model was for medevac and for troop carrying. And then after that, they come with an H model, which was a little higher powered D model. But I was on a C model, which is a Huey gunship. And we carried 2 Gatling guns, one on either side. And they were capable of like 6,000 rounds a minute. And then we carried 28 rockets. I take it back, 14 rockets, 7 on each side. And then each door gunner had a M60 machine gun. So
that's some serious business.
It was serious business. It's dangerous business because, you know, when you load the rockets, they're live. It was not a game. Everything you did was very serious. When you put the guns on it, it was a different deal. But I wasn't responsible for the gun systems. The gun system came under armorers who took care of all that stuff. They set the guns up, and then they would take and we'd sight them in, because the pilot in the left seat, he could aim the guns left and right, up and down. The pilot in command in the right seat, that's the opposite of a fixed wing aircraft. The fixed wing aircraft, the captain sits on the left, the pilot in command. Helicopter, he sits on the right. So his sight was in the middle of the windshield, and he would sight that. Look, they would put a mark on the windshield, just an X with like a magic marker, and what was custom to that pilot. So wherever he was looking, if he was looking through that X, that's where those rockets were going to go.
Wow. That's a crazy targeting system. You just.
Well, what was fun, I shouldn't say it was fun, it was kind of cruel. We would get, in the summertime, we get a lot of enlisted, we get National Guard guys and other people from the military, but were part-timers, and they come out and they give an indoctrination. And a lot of these pilots I flew with were Vietnam vets. They were going back for their second tour, and they would take this helicopter, and we'd be flying through a field, and we'd be up around 120, 30 miles an hour. And there'd be a tree line, just a row of trees across the end of this field. And these guys are all expecting for that helicopter to jump up and over. They didn't jump. They would get down to the end of the field and they would bank it around. And they would bank it around so tight that those rotor blades were, you would not be probably standing between that rotor blade and the ground. They just bank it around and go back the way they came from. And you could see those guys getting very, very nervous.
They're clenching.
They were clenching already. They were white knucklers, let me tell you. But we, the door gunners on these aircraft didn't use seat belts. We had a parachute harness with what they called a monkey strap, which came off the back of the harness, was anchored into the floor. So you could actually stand up in the doorway and you were safe. You weren't going to go out the door.
God, they had at least some form of security measures.
Bill, you ever meet up with your old Army buddies?
No, I have not. They've got an organization now, and they sent me an invitation. I was the first permanently enlisted man to sign into that company at Fort Riley, Kansas, and it was me and a major and a warrant officer W-2 grade, and we were the only 3 guys in the company. And I signed in. I went up and did a check on the airplane. They had a helicopter. They wanted to fly over the Christmas holidays, and it needed a 100-hour check. So I went and did the check, signed it off. They gave me my papers to go on leave. I came back like 2 weeks later, and my God, there was about 40, 50 people in the company already.
Jeez.
They want to treat me like the new guy. So you got this all wrong. I was first. I just left while I showed up.
Give them a seniority check.
Yeah.
I mean, you spent all this time in the Army. Like, what eventually led you to start working at Delta?
Well, I worked for Delta before I went in the Army.
Uh-huh.
But the guys I worked for, all the supervisors at Delta maintenance, I shouldn't say all, but the majority of the guys were maintenance supervisors. They were all World War II vets. They were pretty serious about the military. They didn't think that hurt anybody. And I said, well, it's just only going to hold up my career by 2 years, but what the heck? But Delta treated me right while I was in the Army. I got passes to go home on leave whenever I went home 9 times in 21 months. I mean, that's the general didn't go home 9 times in 21 months. I mean, I was doing good there. And then, I mean, it was just, I made rank. I came out at E5, which is pretty good, equal to a buck sergeant, except I was a specialist. And it was a good experience. I can't knock it.
Once you got back to Delta from the military, what were some of the responsibilities that you held as a sort of an aircraft technician?
Well, it varied over the years, but when an airplane comes into the gate, the first thing that they would do is they chalk the wheels. So they had ground people, what we call ramp service agents. They chalk the wheels. We do a walk around, check all the engines. You look for leaks. You check the tires and brakes for wear, any kind of damage, like a bird strike, if they hit the radome or one of the lead engines of the wing, because a bird can take an engine out in a heartbeat. Well, I think that Sully Sullenberger, the guy that landed on the river back in New York, they took out both engines.
Oh.
Yes, that's a sort of pretty serious deal.
Do they have safety measures for that now? Because I feel like birds are kind of like an ongoing. I mean, they're not going away anytime soon.
Well, they have. You see a lot of airplanes on the spinner on the front of the engine, which could be it could be 2.5 feet in diameter or 2 feet in diameter. It could be much smaller than that. They got a spiral white spiral painted on them. And somebody said that was supposed to deter birds. But I've seen a lot of those spinners come in after a bird strike.
Is it something about the shape?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if they just mesmerized by the thing or what. But there's a lot of things going on at big airports to deter the birds. And they take that very serious.
What was the most important thing that you learned as an aircraft mechanic?
Oh, to be thorough. You cannot you cannot, they, you check, they have a checklist for everything. So depending upon how long the airplane was going to be on the ground and what you do. But one of the things you do, after you do a thorough walk around, you have to service the oil in the engines or check the oil in the engines. We would check the hydraulic fluids, and then you go up to the cockpit and then they have any write-ups. So there was 2 logbooks, one for the cockpit, one for the cabin. And so we checked the cockpit logbook and verify, sometimes they have a dirty windshield, that's a no big deal, right? That's easy. But if they have a problem with an engine or something like that, sometimes you have problems with the autopilot. And I didn't work on the avionics. There were people, that's all they did was avionics work. So radios and the navigation equipment and the radar, that was all special. Those are specialists. And then, of course, the cabin, they would write up 15, 20 different things in the cabin. A seat won't recline, a seat light doesn't work, coffee maker doesn't work, or it won't shut off. It just goes. So when an airplane comes in, hopefully you might have 2, 3 guys on it, especially on a bigger airplane, because you have to turn and run in an X amount of time, and usually it's right at an hour. So you can really be hopping around there, getting things back in service.
Jeez.
You only had an hour to complete those checklists.
Yeah, usually on what you call a through flight, or an airplane that's just coming in turnaround.
That's crazy. And only an hour to make sure that everything's functional.
You got to realize that the crew was doing a check the whole time they were in flight, right? So they're checking the system. They've got an eye on all the systems. They know whether an engine's running hot or not producing full power. And it goes on and on and on. I mean, there's a lot of checks and balances on heavy aircraft.
So they're letting you know what to look for when
Right.
the plane's ready to get serviced.
Right. Well, you go through the whole aircraft checklist.
Like how many things would you say were like on the list? Hundreds?
Well, on some checks there's hundreds. Absolutely. When it comes in for what do they call a letter check, where it might be in the hangar for 24 hours. Well, that's a lot of work on that. And on a smaller check, a through flight, that might be 12 items, 14 items.
Oh, okay, that's not so bad.
Well, but they're all important items. I mean, you can't slough off on any one of them.
Well, that seems to be those 12 or 14 item lists seem to be the good days. Is there any parts of the job that you disliked?
Not really. I mean, I had a really pretty good deal in life working for the airlines. I mean, it was a good job. It had good benefits, and I didn't care for night shift, midnight, 11 to 7 in the morning. Some people loved it. There are people who'd rather work that than anything.
That sounds
If
terrible.
I had to go to day shift, they threatened to quit.
I like the night shifts better.
But I was day shift and then afternoon shift. But on the other hand, I mean, then when you bid shifts, you have to decide what's most important to you. The hours, whether it be days, afternoon, or nights, or the days off. So my goal was day shift with weekends off. That's like that was the crown right there. I mean,
Probably because you also had kids, right, at the time?
Yeah, still have them.
Yeah.
They haven't abandoned me yet, although sometimes they want to.
Yeah, I mean, if you were single, that might have been a different story, right? Like
Even
take
the
days
single
off,
guys look
spend
like
weekends with your kids.
Day shift is like the premium for most people.
Yeah. What was okay, so after you worked at Delta, you retired and you went into being a tech inspector. And it's actually funny that the work you did as a tech inspector for Formula was very similar to the job that you had, where you have a checklist and you have to make sure that everything meets all these criteria. So tell us a little bit about your experience as a tech inspector.
Well, the chief inspector told us one day, he said, when you start inspecting these cars and you point something out that isn't right, these students, that's their baby. They've been living with that car for a year, and they might get a little upset with you. But I never had anybody get upset. I mean, that was really the cat's pajamas. Everybody was pretty cool. We worked on and we go through the whole thing. And we never wanted this. Our goal was we were not there to stop a car from running. We just wanted to make sure that when it went out, it was safe. So, you have to have the catch cans on them. So we made sure the catch cans were all there of sufficient size. We made sure there were a few things they had to do with regulations. For example, there's the wheelbase. We measure the wheelbase. We would we'd check the distance between the roll bar and the front roll hoop, and make sure that the tallest driver wearing a helmet could sit in there, and we put a bar between the two roll hoops so it wouldn't see if his head was behind the bar. We made sure that the exhaust and everything was within a certain zone between the roll hoop and the rear tires. And it went on and on and on. It was all about safety. So if we spotted a bolt that was too short, maybe there wasn't enough thread sticking through the locking nut, or there was a cotter pin missing, they just go out and get a new one and put it right there. So we pretty much tried to get the car through a tech inspection the first time. I mean, we were, no, this is wrong, go back. None of that business, because they stand in the hot sun out there waiting to come in the garage to be inspected. And nobody wants to do that. So, I mean, we did everything we could. We got along. I got along with all the students real well. I never had a bit of trouble. I thought, some kids that, I was always looking for guys from my home state of Wisconsin, kind of razz them a little bit, but they went right along. They thought everything was cool.
How much have you seen the rules change since you started and when you stopped?
Not that much.
Well, technically, you're still mentoring, so I'm sure you're keeping up with the rules. So, like, how much have they changed?
Not that much. The engines are getting bigger, but I think just to give you an idea how tough Formula SAE is. Formula SAE was first started in 79. It was in 79, the cars ran like a 5-horse Briggs & Stratton engine, which is basically what I had on a go-kart when I was a kid. So that was, but starting out in about 1980, that's when it started getting big. And it grew and grew and grew. Now, give you an idea how tough Formula SAE is. In the West, we have about between 90 and 100 cars entered. Now, some of the cars, when I was teching, there were no electric cars. They were all internal combustion cars. The Michigan event, they get about 120 cars. And it used to be an event back east. I think, I'm not sure it was in Virginia or North Carolina, but they'll be about the same as we were out here in terms of car entrance. To give you an idea just how tough Formula SAE is, it wasn't until 2017 in Lincoln, Nebraska, that 50% of the cars finished the endurance.
Jeez.
50% of the cars, and that was the first year that 50% of the cars, when that car finished, they announced it, and it was like a major deal. Up to then, they'd never been. So, I mean, I saw a car from Auburn University. That thing looked like it came out of a factory. It looked like it was one of 100. It was just gorgeous. There wasn't one thing. I mean, you couldn't say anything bad about that car. They were running in the endurance. I can't remember if it was the first driver or the second driver. Going into one of the last turns, they lost a wheel. The whole hub assembly just snapped off. The spindle broke on the left front. I mean, my last year in Lincoln in 17, they took 3 different kids to the hospital for burns because of like radiator hoses breaking or other coolant leaks.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's really intense. I mean, it's tough, and to see I mean, you just can't imagine what kind of frustration goes into it. I would not recommend anybody spend their time, well, this is me. This isn't anybody else. I don't see any sense in taking a car to an event if it hasn't been tested for a month. Because every car we took to an event that didn't finish, when we brought back here and ironed the bugs out of it, they were bulletproof. They would run indefinitely. But you got to get them to that point where they're bulletproof before you should take them. It's just that tough.
What was the weirdest experience, or like maybe the weirdest thing that either happened during tech inspection or that somebody got sent back for, or what was the weirdest tech inspection non-pass that you saw?
Well, I've seen several cars that were just, for example, one car, and I'm not sure where they were from, but Lincoln Welding, the company, they have a tent at all the events where they set up, and you can, if you have to do some welding, they provide the welder and the operator. I've seen cars where the from the front roll hoop up to the front frame of the car, if it went under another car, it would just drop right in the driver's feet, or hit him in the feet, and they had to weld that up. I mean, they had to put an extra bar in. I saw cars. You know what Percy is? You deal with Percy in Baja. Percy is a series of 3 wheels. One represents the head, the butt, and then.
Oh, I see.
Like,
yeah, we have a version of that. We call it, I guess we call it Jake in a way. I think we call it Jake.
So Percy has to fit, and then they come in with these templates. There's 2 templates. One template you have to be able to drop down right into the cockpit, right down to the seat. And the second template has to be able to be passed through the frame all the way to the brake pedals. I've seen one car that the Percy would not drop in, and it was just by a fraction of an inch. And they begged and pleaded, and finally, well, the top people from SAE was all here from Detroit, and the top people from this district got him aside and said, "Look, you can see that Percy just does not drop in, so legally the car shouldn't run, but it's so close, and the drivers in this car are so much smaller than the optimum size that they can get out of that car, but you have to do the egress. You guys do egress?
Yeah.
Get out of the car in 5 seconds?
Yeah.
Well, some of these cars have really expensive steering wheels, a lot of technology in them. So there's a kid standing there. When that driver, when he blows the whistle, he'll snatch that wheel off. He hands it to the kid, grabs it, and they jump out. Well, the guy from Detroit caved in. But for one of them, about a 1/4 inch, that car was not going to go.
Jeez.
That's not easy to fix either, because it's like that's like almost the whole chassis.
You have to rebuild the frame. I saw the car from Berkeley go upside down on the tilt table. That wasn't necessary.
Tell us about what happened on the tilt table.
Well, the tilt table was supposed to stop just beyond 90 degrees. And it's not supposed to go over. And it did. The table kept going. It just took them out. I think 90 degrees is the max. I'm not sure. There's 90 or just a little bit more, but this thing went completely upside down.
So you had a student upside down on the tilt table.
But the harness held. So, and up until it was upside down, there were no leaks.
Did they fall out?
No. Tilted the car back and away he went. Took a while to get the car running again, but it was good.
It would be interesting to hear from UC Berkeley. Reach out to us if you're listening.
Berkeley, that was a long time ago. I bet you say all those people have jobs and are
probably, huh? I wonder if their team knows that happened.
Sure they do.
I'm sure
Do
they
you
do.
remember, do you happen to know what year that was?
No, I don't. I don't.
Oh man.
Well, aside from being a tech inspector, you were mentoring the Baja team for since about 11 or 12.
Yeah,
What are
but
some of the like ups and downs of you being a mentor for that team? I'm sure they can be a real pain in the you know what when you're there at their design reviews and stuff like that. So what are some of the key things that you notice when you're mentoring these guys?
well, you know, putting a team together is really tough because a lot of people get into the team not knowing what to expect. And I think that for the most part, they're shocked because it's building one of these cars is a really, really big deal. I mean, it's over the top tough. And a lot of kids, a lot of people get into it. First off, you think a team like, there's some team schools around here, they won't let anybody, if you're like a freshman, they don't even want you to touch the car. If you're like a sophomore, you can touch the car with special permission. I mean, they think that only upperclassmen can work on the car, and in many cases that's probably true. But the hard part about building the car is holding people's interest. I think a lot of people, when they find out they can't work on the car the first year, they just go away. Cal State Los Angeles is unique. If you want to work on the car and help with the car, you can do it. And Cal State Los Angeles, that's the students have more access to the lab than any other school I know of. I mean, they just let them go out there and just work on the car. And a lot of times I've been on campus, and those are the only places. The engineering labs are the only places that have anybody around. You know, the rest of the school's like a ghost town. So I mean, it's really a unique school, and it's a great experience. I think that Cal State Los Angeles, from that standpoint, is the very best. But getting the kids, see, I bring a whole different perspective to things. I look at it from a practical standpoint. The most difficult system on a formula car is the electrical, because the electrical system literally goes from the nose to the back bumper. You know, you have up at the front, you have the brake override switch. At the back, you have the tail light, and in between, you have fuel pumps and fans and all your sensors, O2 sensors and throttle position sensors. It goes on and on and on, and it's really a giant project. And I have always tried to get the electrical team to build a system that is 100% troubleshootable. Because if when you're out there at a competition and something isn't right, you do not have to. You don't want to be out there sorting wires out. I try to get the wires color coded or numbered, one or the other. So with a good schematic, so you can look at it and say, we're not getting a spark on the left cylinder. What's causing it, and be able to pinpoint it. I mean, it's just tough. And then you got to get a team that works together real close, and there's no infighting and no badgering one another. I mean, we were back at a competition. University of Kansas changed an engine. Changing an engine on one of these cars is a big deal. They changed an engine. They had a 4-cylinder Honda. They pulled one out, put one in. And I mean, most of these cars, it's a giant project.
Yeah.
But some of the teams, some of these teams like from Texas, UTA has every car they ever built.
Wow.
They have.
I don't think our Formula team has like a single one.
They have 2, it's a lot. And the only reason we have 2 is because we got a new engine.
Yeah. But they did a really big overhaul from automatic to manual. Is that what it was?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But UTA, they have a room that's surrounded in glass where you can see all the cars.
Wow.
Every car they ever built.
Just the space for that alone is incredible.
Just think of how much money is wrapped up in tires and wheels and brakes. Just tires, wheels, and brakes on all those cars since 1980.
Wow.
I mean,
That's a lot.
and all the engines. But some of these big schools have endowments where they were given like $1 billion to invest, and the endowment pays out. They can take as much as $100,000 to build a car. So some of these schools will build an IC car and an electric car. They're identical in every way except for how they're propelled. It just goes on, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's
So,
crazy.
I mean, they're not worried. They're not considering selling fruit bowls or you know, having a night at a pizza shop or anything like that. They just got the money there.
Yeah.
We went down one time. They asked us to come down to Cal State Long Beach. We went down and saw their lab and their shop, and but they had about the same issues that we had. They took the car apart for something, and they're having trouble getting it back together. And I mean, you could just see the tension building up in these students' faces when they're trying to put this car together at the last minute. This is like 2 days before they're supposed to be leaving for the event, and it hadn't run in about 3 weeks.
Jeez.
And we went down to Irvine, UC Irvine, to inspect one of their cars for them, just to give them an idea of what it was going to be like. And they had 10 students. I don't know if you've ever been to Irvine, but right outside of their labs, they had 10, the car was sitting there, had 10 students right around. They were going to go with the car to the event. And now they have a loading dock. And up on that loading dock was about 50 more students that are part of the team. And they, and every time we said something, the professor was telling them, write it down. Take a note of that. So they're intense. I mean, they were really concerned about what was being done and what was being said and the reason for it. So it's really a big deal.
We went to RIT, and over there, their machine shop is sponsored. So they get new like lathes and mills and stuff like that every, 3 years or so. And it's like at Cal State LA, I don't think our machines have been replaced since the day they brought them in.
Well, no, we now have what they call the maker space.
Yeah.
Chris
Yeah,
Buck,
but I think even the machines in there are old. Well, some of them are new. Like we just got CNCs, but like the lathes and the mills weren't they already there? They've been there.
we have 2 brand new Haas mills,
Oh,
and they got a brand new water jet, big new water jet, computer operated water jet.
yeah, the water jet is new. Started
And
flooding
got
the fall.
laser cutters, and it's really nice. It's very nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
Put that together. He
come
did.
visit us.
That's like one of the biggest things that I think Cal State LA is like, because you had mentioned you went to UCI and you noticed that the professor there was sort of encouraging the students to take notes, and that's probably one of the biggest things that Cal State LA lacked in the past, probably not counting this year, but the past few years, where the professors aren't necessarily backing all these students, and especially the college with funds and things like that. So it's great to have people like you, Bill, and like Bachman that are actually pushing these students, because if you guys weren't there, I think it'd be a bit of a different story. But yeah, I think we need to definitely continue to push for more mentorship and people like you, Bill, that are willing to help us out. Yeah.
You know, the original reason to have mentors, and there was probably about 10 schools that had mentors. The reason was to try and boost the standings of the Southern California schools. But these big schools like University of Wisconsin, Madison, and one Texas schools, and Auburn back in Georgia, a lot of those students come from far from the campus. So they don't go home on the weekends. They're there for 3, 4, 5 months at a time. And I think they have more time to put into the cars, into the projects. And so I think that's why they tend to do a little better.
Yeah, that's true for sure. Because Cal State LA is a huge commuter school. Huge commuter school.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Hardly anybody lives on campus. At least like if you really bring it down to Baja and Formula, like I don't know if I've ever met anybody who was actually living on the campus. There have been a couple who lived off campus, but they lived like really close by.
Yeah.
But I don't know that anybody was dorming on the campus. Usually it's like international students or out of state students who take up the little like dorm area that they have.
Yeah.
Do you think that after instating that the mentorship program for SoCal that the teams started to do better? And would you say like they need to kind of like re-implement it now that a lot of the mentors that were there in the first round like have kind of fizzled out a little bit?
I would say it would be a good idea. I don't see how it can't hurt. You got people who are willing to come out and spend their time there and just give advice and point things out. It can't hurt. It's definitely going to be of some help. The thing of it is, a lot of students kind of don't like you to tell them.
They want to steer the ship, huh?
Yeah, well, the problem is that they don't know what they don't know. And it sounds kind of goofy, but the fact of the
That
matter
sounds
is,
familiar.
I mean, you can look at a guy and how he approaches the problem and have a pretty good idea how they're going to pull it off and how they're going to, what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. But a lot of kids come in there and they really put a lot of effort into it and they gain from it. I think if any student was on a team and I was doing the hiring for a company, if you were on a team a year or two, I'd almost look at that almost as if you had a year of work experience. And if you're on a really crack team, one that was a top 10 finisher, boy, that really carries some weight. But you know, you're no team is any stronger than its weakest link. I mean, they just.
What do you think was like the biggest thing that one of the Formula students have gotten into after they graduated?
Well, I mean, a lot of them are working for Cummins and General Dynamics and I mean, I don't know where all of them are, but you know, a lot of students want to get into like Formula One or IndyCar or NASCAR, and those are usually millionaires or billionaires' pet projects, and I don't think that's a real stable work experience. Whereas a job with somebody like General Dynamics or General Motors or Ford, when we go to a Formula event, you'll see Honda there, you'll see Ford there, you might see several other companies there, and they go from team to team to team, wanting to know if there's any graduating seniors. Do you have any graduating seniors here who would like to talk to us about a job? So, I mean, I cannot put enough emphasis on being on a collegiate design team, whether it's, you know, Formula or super mileage or aero design or any of them. I mean, what you get out of that in terms of learning is priceless.
What was one of the schools that kind of like really stood out to you as being like a really successful team?
University of Kansas Lawrence. University.
What did you like about how their team ran, or like what was it about that team that stood out to you?
Well, they were the guys I told you changed an engine in their car. They come there at a spare engine. Another team that's really strong was Michigan State. We stayed at a hotel, and I look out in the parking lot, and there's two box trucks that you rent from Hertz, and there was a bunch of students out there. And I said, "What's going on?" They said, "Oh, we blew an engine just before we came to the event, and the guys have 3 engines up in the room, and they're trying to make one out of the 3." And they were, so these guys are ripping down 3 engines to put one back together in their hotel room. The hotel had no idea, I'm sure. But, I mean, and what they did was they took the car, they went to the school with a dummy car. I don't know if it was a dummy car, but somehow or other they registered. And they were ready to go right up to the last day if they had to qualify and get through tech inspection. I mean, those guys were really, they were into it. And then there's the University of Rochester from New York. They're a top team. And Auburn, University of Wisconsin, Michigan, Madison. A lot of top teams. A lot of good teams come down from Canada.
What do you think is like your favorite build? Like what parts of the car in combination do you think kind of like worked best or was like really impressive to you? Or like what was your favorite build on the car?
The suspension is very tough. The rear suspension is tough. The front suspension is tough. And you try and get some ideas across to the students. You know, there's some things that make it like a lot easier. Like when you're the bars where you attach your front and rear suspension to, I like to see them parallel so that they tend to work a little easier. Somebody told the students that you don't need to have any adjustments in your suspension. I said, you should sell that to Ford and Chevy because every car they build has suspension adjustments. And it just goes on and on. I get a kick out of it because they really have some set ideas. If you just, I guess it's good. If you think you got a good idea, stick with it until you find out it's not a really good idea. But it just goes on and on and on.
I think one of the craziest things for me was how kind of people are, I don't know how long this has been around. I'm not too in the loop about Formula, but one of the crazy things that I saw was that they're kind of moving to like replace carbon fiber bodies with like parachute material.
Yeah.
I don't know. Has that been around for a really long time?
You know, a lot of light aircraft, the wings are covered in fabric. You know
How
that?
about in the competition though? Like, have a lot of cars done that in the past? I don't think that would even pass tech, no? It must have, because I think teams have gone to competition like that already, no?
I don't think the body has too much to do with, they don't rely on the body components as a safety factor or a streamlining factor. So, I mean, I was talking to our guy, one of our kids is working on the aero package and just the body in general.
I know that's Andy.
I'm trying to get him to, I said, you can shape this out of just styrofoam, put your glass over it, make it any shape you want, fiberglass it, resin it, and then when it's all set up, you can dissolve the styrofoam. You can make the panel the shape any shape you want. But the cars that are fabric, I haven't seen too much of that.
It's like I don't know what parachute material is made out of. I would say it's probably either like a nylon or polyester blend, something. I don't know.
You know, a lot of kids, a lot of cars, they put these big fancy aero packages on. Man, I'll tell you what, I'm not so sure about that. That was a different deal as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, speaking of like these really like cool innovations that these teams come up with, we do have someone that asked a question through one of our forums and they wanted to know like what are some of the common oversights or mistakes that you've seen throughout cars and teams throughout the years? Because you mentioned some really great builds, but there are definitely some oversights that people tend to not look at.
I think that that's really tough. Just, you know, a lot of the people are welding on these cars haven't done a lot of welding. So really, I've talked to people who learned to weld on the car that they brought to competition. They were beautiful. I mean, they look very good. But there's a lot to a weld, other than looking good, that has to be, you know, penetration and making sure that everything was fit right before you welded. But I really don't know. I think that the best thing for these kids to do is to just work within your limits, design within your limits, design within your ability to fabricate. Because a lot of people go out there and they do some strange things. There's nothing can replace testing. The more you test those cars and the more time you put into driving them and making sure everything's gonna work, the better off you are. That's just as simple as it gets. A lot of people, you know, you have to make sure that everything on that car goes full travel. So like if your rear suspension, you have to make sure you can move it up and down, full travel, front suspension, full travel, and make sure that nothing's in a bind. Because when things get in a bind, they work hard and break.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you're in the middle of the competition and it's a bad scene. I don't think, I would never recommend anybody take a car to competition that isn't running. If you go to competition and they tech the car, that's it. That's your car. And if you don't take it and get it checked in, if you just go back there and do the sales talk and give it the cost presentation, you're okay. You got the experience for that. But if you take the car back and let them tech it, whether it runs or not, you got to start with a new car the next year. And that doesn't work. That's a bad deal.
Oh, okay. So if you bring it to tech, you can't.
Once they
tech, you can't use it.
No, that's right. So if you got a car in 15 that wasn't really ready to go, but you let them tech it, you can't run that car again.
Wow.
It's one-time use. I actually didn't know that all formula cars were one-time use cars.
Yeah. So it's in your best interest when you take a car back there to make sure it's a good car, it's ready to go.
I mean, what stops people from, you know, going through tech and then still using the same car next year? Like maybe just change some colors or how do they verify next year?
I don't know how they verify. I really don't. I do know that they'll disqualify if they catch it.
Oh, okay.
They will catch. So it's kind of the honor system, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't get involved in it.
Yeah, that's a risky thing to do.
Very risky.
Exactly.
So we'll do like the last competition question. Favorite and least favorite competition that you went to with our Formula team?
Boy. Well, the first one was really good. The first competition we went to, we had one problem. Our side impact bars weren't right, and we had to borrow some tubing and weld them in. And God, that was just right down to the wire to get that through tech and get it all checked out and everything. And that was probably the hardest that team ever worked together in all the time I've been with them. Tough.
It's always like the difficult moments.
But we had the last time I went to tech, I want to say it was 17. And we went to I went to Lincoln, and we went back there, and we couldn't make the car go up, couldn't pass sound. And so what they did was, and this is all completely legal, they take the muffler off, and they wanted to borrow something for something to put in there to calm it down, quiet it down. So they borrowed some, I think it was Bright Boy scrubbing pads, like for pots and pans in a restaurant. And they
Like it's almost like a sponge, right?
No, it looks like a,
It's like a woolly sponge.
yeah, kind of, but it's metal. It's metal, and they put it in the muffler and tried it, and it worked. It worked good. No, but you don't, and then from there, so the way it went, once you went through the visual tech inspection, where they look at the car, they measure everything, check all your nuts and bolts and washers and safety wires and all that. Then you go to the tilt table. From the tilt table, you go to sound, and then from sound, you go to the brake test. The brake test, you run the car down the track, so just maybe a couple hundred yards. You run this thing down this track as hard as the car will go, and you hit the brakes. When you hit the brakes, it's supposed to stop in a straight line, which means all four wheels are going to lock up at the same time. And all four wheels have to lock up. I don't care if you can stop on a dime with two, they want four. So we went through that, and we passed that. We got our stickers. And the next thing we were going to go to was acceleration, I think. And then from there to skid pad, and then to slalom. No, it was called slalom. But I forget. So anyway, when we got out of the brake test and got off our stickers, that was too late. They shut everything else down. So the next day was Saturday, and that's the endurance. And so because of our stature, the cars with the most points go last. The cars with the fewest number of points go first. So they go out there, take the car in for the endurance, and it wouldn't start. And they gave us probably 45 minutes or an hour of opportunity to start that car, and it would not start. And they just people go ahead of us. We bought the car over by the fence, so there were the three guys with the car on the inside, and there was actually four guys with the car. The driver, the driver's going to drive, the second driver, and then I think there's two people that had to help with the seat belts. We worked on it. We did everything we could do to get that car to run. It would not start. When it came back here, they worked on that car, I can't tell you how long, until they finally got it to start. Now, I never did find out exactly why it wouldn't start, but I will tell you something. I am convinced that it was those Bright Boy polishers that they stuck in the exhaust, because I have a 90 GMC pickup. I left the house, I went down to the corner, that's about 500 feet. I made a right turn, and it quit. And we got that car back in my driveway, and we worked on that truck long and hard. You know what fixed it? Take a guess. What do you think caused that truck to stop and not start? I'll tell you what we did. We rebuilt the electronics package in the distributor, replaced all the wires, the cap and rotor, the plugs. We rebuilt the throttle body, and we replaced the timing chain and gears. Now, what do you think made it run?
I don't know.
I'll tell you what made it run. The catalytic converter was plugged.
Oh, was it really?
That's what did it. And when we So this was suggested to me that was a problem. We dropped the header pipes off the manifold and it fired right up. Put them back on, it wouldn't run. So we left them down. So what we did, we put the header pipes up and we cut the pipe off right in front of the catalytic converter. I went to a muffler shop and got a new catalytic converter.
Whoa! And you think that's what might have caused
That's why I think caused it to not run. I think that if they would have dropped that muffler off, but I hadn't had that experience with my catalytic converter prior to that. Had I had that experience, I would say, let's drop the muffler off and it would probably have started. But then they had to pull all the brake boys out of it and they wouldn't have passed sound check. But we wouldn't have worried about that. We would have just ran anyway.
Yeah.
That's the story. That blows your mind, but that's the fact.
And speaking about, your pickup, you do have a 37 Plymouth. What can you tell us about that one? You say you still have it. It's your first car.
Well, when you're 14, 15 years old, and you hear that word old car, I mean, that's like
time stops.
That's it. I mean, that's the whole thing. What kind of old car? You wouldn't like it. That was my dad. You wouldn't like it. Well, let me decide if I like it or not. We got it, and I drove it all through high school. And then I decided to put a Oldsmobile engine in it, a 303 Olds, which was a 1953 engine. And we put it in, but we never really got it running very good. And then I went away to school. My dad said, you gotta do something with that car. You can't just leave it in the garage. I need to park my car in the garage. So I take this car, and we took it out to my friend's farm. We put it out behind a chicken coop, and it sat there from 63 till, I don't know, 98, 89. So,
oh my God.
And then about 89, the family sold the farm. And if a friend of mine called me up, he says, Keefers are selling the farm. You got to get that thing out of there. I said, go and get it. And he had an oil business. So he had a big lot where they operated an oil business out of. And they went and got it and put it out in the lot. And he was always pulling my leg. He put signs on it, for sale cheap and stuff like that. So I said, you find somebody that will pull that thing as far as Denver, and I'll go over to Denver and rent a truck and bring it over here. And he got a guy to do it. So the guy put it on a U-Haul trailer, which I paid for. He brought it as far as Denver. And we met him not far from the Denver airport. We had a rented truck. We hooked on and brought it home. And that sat in my driveway for a long time. And then I started working on it. So it's a forever project.
That's awesome. I mean, did you mention that it belonged to your father's best friend's family? Did it mean a lot to him, that car? Or
well,
was it just...
I don't know if it did, but he got it. He really didn't want to get it, I don't think. I don't think he really thought that was the coolest thing in the world. But we had a lot of fond memories of that old Plymouth, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was an exciting experience.
That's a crazy trip that car took. I mean, sat in a barn for, gosh, close to 30 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those deals where they could have gone by the wayside at any moment. But they said, when they sold the farm, that's what started the machine in motion again.
And you said it still works, huh?
What's that?
Still runs?
No, well, I took the Oldsmobile engine out and gave it to another friend who's gonna probably put it in some kind of a hot rod, because that's kind of like a classic hot rod engine from the 50s, And I'll probably put a Corvette engine or some kind in it.
Jeez. That'd be
You don't have to
cool.
put a lot of power in. The original engine was about 85 horsepower. And it was fast enough to kill you. So you don't really have to put a lot of horsepower in one of these things to
get it going.
Serious damage. But it was a fun ride.
Have you had any other like really cool projects that you had the opportunity to work on in your lifetime?
We, well, besides helping a couple of daughters remodel houses and stuff like that, and then we built that camper, a truck camper. That was a major project. That was 2.5 years. But
I think you
everywhere he goes, he gets a lot of positive comments on it.
I think you said that camper was in a movie or something?
No, the guy who owns it worked in the movie industry.
Someone in the movie industry is like a film
He filmed that.
guy.
So we got that put together. We had it in my driveway for like 90 days. I've been putting the interior in it. And that just goes on and on and on. It's
How long did it take you guys to fix it up?
2.5 years. 2.5 years. I mean, it's a major project. Huge.
What kind of work did you guys do on it?
Everything. We from the basic idea, the basic concept to fabric. Okay, so we did not make the windows. That's obvious. We bought windows, 6 of them. We bought a hatch for a sailboat, an aluminum hatch that we put up on top over the what we call the bunkhouse where the bed is for an escape hatch. Of course, we didn't make the 2-burner stove or the microwave, but you know it's got two golf cart batteries that operate a static inverter for AC electrical, and then we can also plug the camper into like campground power. So we had to make sure you could isolate the two, because you don't ever want 2 different sources of AC electrical coming together, because if they're out of phase, the excitement begins. So we set on the inverter that it's a smart inverter, that it will, within a millisecond, it senses the phase and will kick it off. I said, I just as soon not believe that. So we put a switch in, so it's either one or the other, or off. But it's got a refrigerator, a furnace, air conditioning, hot and cold running water.
That's better than my house. No.
It's a big deal. There's a lot of thought had to go into this thing, because to do something like that, there's no going back. When you start closing stuff up and putting it together, you have to make sure the wiring's right, the plumbing's right, and this goes on and on and on. But just to do the interior, it took us almost 90 days. I mean, we were fooling around with that. Lance Camper out in Palmdale, they turn out about 25, 30 campers a day. So just to give you an idea, but they got a lot of people, and they got a bulletproof system. We were cutting and measuring and fitting and stuff like that. So between the AC, 2 electrical systems, the AC systems, and a DC system that takes care of all the internal lights and the water pump and stuff like that, it gets pretty involved. Then you got all the clearance lights that are on it for make it road legal. And it just goes on and on and on.
If you got a picture of it, we'd love to see it. That'd be really cool.
I'll have to find one for you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Between the guy who owns the camper and my wife, they took a lot of pictures of it, and I put together a book. It's about 38 pages, but I had Costco printed up with all the pictures, and it shows it step by step, everything that went into this project, as far as starting with the bare skeleton, then all the frame members that go up into it. The only thing on that outside of that camper that I knew we could not do were the 4 corners where the sides and the ends and the top all transition. It was just, I don't know of anybody who can do it, but I found a guy, and he was a metal spinner. He is a metal spinner in Compton, and he I called him up. I said, "Can you spin a 30-inch bowl?" Well, I called the one guy in San Pedro, and I said, "Hey, can you spin a 30-inch bowl?" He said, "No, but my cousin can." So I got in touch with his cousin over in Compton, and he spun 2 bowls. Because when you get a bowl, you can't cut it in quarters because you have to have a little bit of a flange on either side of the bend. So we took 2 bowls, and we cut them up. So we got 2 spare corners if we ever need them. But man, what a job!
What's the name of the book?
The what?
The book.
This Kevin's Camper.
Kevin's Camper?
There's exactly 4 copies. I have, Kevin has 2. But people always asking, how do you do it? So I gave him one for the house and one for the camper. So when he goes someplace, I said, "I'll show you how we did it."
That's a cool keepsake.
Well, it was a major project. It was not an overnight deal. I tell you, that was lots of work. We just the cutting and gluing of all the wood and all the sheet metal. I mean, we attached the sides of the camper to the wooden frames using 5200, which is a marine glue.
Right.
And then we put pop rivets into it to hold it. But we strapped it together with a cargo straps, those orange cargo straps from Harbor Freight.
We've done some work on Baja with those too.
We almost had 30 or 40 of them. We just wrap them around, pull it up tight, and get everything in place, and hope everything's in the right place. It doesn't shift. Then you shoot the rivets in and keep on going.
That's the most important step. Just cross your fingers.
I think about this, all were important because there's no going back. Once you finish an area, you start putting the interior in, you don't want to be ripping it out. It's just too much work. We had cabinets over the kitchen counter and cabinets over the refrigerator and over the dinette, and it just goes on and on and on.
That's a cool project.
It's a big deal. It's a huge deal.
Oh, we got one more last question for you, Bill. Probably one of the most important ones. Where do you see yourself in the future?
Boy, I don't know. Right now, I'm rebuilding our boat. Not completely rebuilding. We did that in 2001. But we're getting ready to paint it. That's a big project. I don't know. Somebody will come along with some goofy idea and I can't resist it. If it sounds like fun, I try it. I try to not overextend myself too much. So it can be pretty rough. And everybody's got a pet project they want to work on. But I want to get this Plymouth running. I'd like to get that going. I don't know. Always something.
Always something, huh?
Yeah, there is. It's always something. I don't let it bother me too much because I just keep on forging ahead.
Well, we hope that you have a lot of projects in store for the future that you can have lots of fun with rebuilding and all of these, not only automotive, but other projects as well. But thank you, Bill, for taking the time to talk to us about your experiences as a tech inspector in the military and all the fun stuff that you've done. We hope to have you on again. And so that wraps up episode 5 of the Staying Muddy podcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
See you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to Staying Muddy Podcast. I'm Mr. You can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok with the handle Baja SAE. You can also check out our website, Baja SAE, if you want to check out more stuff about our team, and we also have some merch on there as well. You can also join our Staying Muddy Podcast subreddit if you'd like. Thanks again for listening. See ya.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Staying Muddy podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Baja SAE and Cal State Los Angeles.